Greetings, fellow settlers. Rodamon here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of a new series covering Of Life and Land. If you would like to skip the game's overview or the setup of this series, please use YouTube chapters. Of Life and Land is a settlement building strategy game where you colonize a vast wilderness to attract immigrants who are yearning for the frontier. Build up industries and agriculture to support and supply your citizens with what they need to thrive. Engage in diplomacy with nearby cities and trade to make your colonies more vibrant and wealthy. In this series, I'll be playing the default Kerzoven map. It is not procedurally generated, but this game has like a dozen maps, and the tutorial will be turned on.
The year 1012. Kerzoven. An untouched, almost uninhabited region on the edge of the empire. In other areas of the country, villages and towns are growing fast. So fast that space soon becomes scarce. Real division leaves hires without land and property. But we still have room here, and we could use the people. This is our chance. Let's invite them and together create a thriving region worth living in. Kerzoven.
So let's create a new game, which is this button here. And these are the maps you've got. The 4 Kerzoven maps, which allow for... the first 3 allow for multi-settlements, which we'll get into possibly later. And then you've got the Lensburg and Rasenna maps. But I'm going to be playing the default one, the original.
Ah, good that you are here. I sent for you because I have an important task for you. The situation in the southern part of the empire is steadily worsening due to rapid population growth. It becomes more and more difficult for the common people. Farms are cut smaller and smaller because of the division of inheritance, while taxes remain the same or even increase. New land can only be gained to a limited extent by clearing or by developing less optimal areas. Even among the nobility, there are more and more descendants who are not entitled to inherit. We are Kerzoven, one of the largest estates in the empire. We still do not have large cities and productive villages, and are therefore insignificant. I would like to change that. I send you north. Explore the region. Be wise and see that the people lack nothing. This way, new settlers will join you, and if you are open and decent to them and their customs, they will stay. Build a community center to consolidate your position in the region, but also take care of your supplies, because the summer is quickly over. Good luck! I'm counting on you.
Alright, here we are in the default map. And before I start, I'm going to quickly go over the user interface so that you know what's going on. In the top left, we have population progress. Basically, as you fulfill your citizens' needs, you will grow your city kind of like an anno, but it's a little bit more flexible where there's not actually tiers, where citizens, if they lack a certain thing, will be bumped down a tier. We'll get into that later. The name of our city, which is called Valley, and I'll be renaming this later, because renaming it is part of the tutorial later. We have got faction data. And you can also get your faction data by hitting F, the F or Foxtrot key, which is all your population, their age, their health, what they're doing, what their progress is. So progress for your citizens is a case-by-case basis, where each one of them has their own progress meter. How many are homeless? So right now, all of them, all 10. How many are unemployed, and how many babies? We've got wealth, which is measured in gold. And then if we click this, they'll break down. We've got food, which is bread and bark roots and sprouts. We've got fodder and raw meat, drinks, no materials, no equipment. Basically, we're naked. In the top right, you've got the time of year, the speed controls, and the seasons. So we are just at the start of spring. And it goes spring, summer, autumn, winter, obviously. Some of the buttons here allows you to turn on overlays and off overlays. So like this one, for instance, turns off scroll panning, and then this one turns off, left mouse save positions. It doesn't really matter. On the right here, we have notices, journal events. So I'll read the first one. Arrival. As dawn breaks, you and your little expedition reach a breathtaking, hilly area. You can feel it in your bones. This is the place where you will build a new settlement. Now it is time to put the promise of good life into practice. Who knows? Maybe you're about to found one of the most important settlements in the Empire. You have your quests here, which can break out into a quest overlay here. Let's only hide that for a second. So the first quest is constructing buildings, and then is also the raw material supply. And we'll get into that in a minute. You have your mini-map down here, and there's an entire tutorial about that, so I'm not going to get to that right now. So the first tutorial, opening the building menu. Press B or click the build menu. You can rotate buildings. So if we select, let's say, the forester stump, R rotates it, and then placing buildings with left click. So the building material supply here, this quest, wants us to build a forester stump, which allows us to cut down trees for branches and wood. It wants us to plant a broadleaf tree, make a gatherer's shack, build a garden bed, and make a simple stonemason. So let's get that going. For the first one, I'm just going to place the forester stump. Ideally, you want it to be around as many trees as possible that are like not fruit trees. So for instance, down here in the south, it's almost all fruit trees. I know the overlay is really small, but it says 19 fruit trees and 39 bushes. So we're going to want conifers or broadleaf, and I'm going to put it here for the conifers. And in order to build it, the forester stump and a few of the other starting buildings are like really cheap, whereas they don't require material, but most buildings do. The forester stump is just an exception. It wants us to plant a broadleaf tree, and I'll plant one here. It's important to note in this game, old growth forests can produce things like mushrooms, but not if you plant the trees too densely together. So if you're trying to do forestry, you should spread the trees out in some sort of like natural-like density, because if you put them all next to one another, they're not as productive as they otherwise could be. Alright, so now we have the forester stump and broadleaf tree. The gatherer shack. So the gatherer shack is basically how you will procure food early on, but there's a caveat to this which is very important to note. If we mouse over the food here, the food up here is measured in the number of days that we have food for, which is like we have food for like about a day. Here's the caveat. Your citizens are exceptionally good at figuring out how to feed themselves. So if your food up here says 0, you're not starving. Because unless you're in the winter, I suppose. It might be a little tricky. But what will happen if you have no food is they'll forage it. Albeit maybe not efficiently. But essentially, if this number is really low, that's kind of normal for this game. Because your citizens are just awesome at foraging their own food. So whenever they're hungry, they'll go up to a bush and be like, yoink, thank you for the fruit. So just keep that in mind as you play. Trying to stockpile an immense amount of food is like not strictly necessary, but having a bunch of intermediary food provisions, like having a lot of flour or cereal grains might make sense. But trying to stockpile a massive amount of fruit just is a little weird. All right, so the other thing, the gatherer shack. The gatherer shack allows you to harvest from the land, and you can see the sort of like glowing green diamond around it. That is its range. And you're going to want to put so my first gatherer shack, I highly, highly, highly advise that you leave a lot of open space around it, because the Gatherer Shack is also the main way you make basic, like, flax-like stuff. So it's important to have a Gatherer Shack that is surrounded by, like, grain fields. And ideally not wild grain fields. So I'm going to place it here. And then the last one is, well, then it wants me to put the garden beds. And the garden beds require water and, like, roots and bark and stuff, but it will produce fruits and veggies. So right next to the garden shack, or the Gatherer Shack, I'm going to plant some garden beds here. And then the last one is the stonemason. The stonemason is does have a building cost, unlike the forester's stump, as does the garden shack for that matter. And the stonemason should be placed around stones. So we have like a decent amount of stones up here. 11. Now there are places on the map that are like quarries that you might want to establish later on. But really early game, I would say it's more important to have things locally procurable with not long travel times. So I'm going to put the stone gatherer up here. And as you can see, the map comes with built-in like ramps and the like. So there we go. That's our starting buildings. I'm going to play on a really slow game speed, just so that we can like ease into the complexity of this game. Because this game is surprisingly complex for its like relatively simple looking graphics and the like. And I'm just interested in fulfilling the jobs. So the Forester Stump got built, and in this, I picked a bad spot for the overlay. Let me move this a little bit. There we go. If we look here, your employee will be automatically hired, which is this checkbox. And if you want to fire them, you have to uncheck that checkbox and then fire them here. But you can also manually hire people if you want. And the activities will go from top to bottom, and they will fill up their supply. So the Forester Stump has an internal supply of like 10 raw wood, 10 branches, 30 mushrooms. Unlike a lot of the other games that you'll play, if you want to have more supply, like if you want to build up a larger raw wood supply, the way to go about this is to actually upgrade your Forester Stump for the internal storage. So I could add 20 more storage for each of the resources it could produce at a yearly cost of 10 raw wood. The reason I mention this is some of the upgrades here are immensely powerful. Like, for a yearly cost of 5 rough-hewn stones, we can double our processing speed. That's insane. That is such a big bonus. And there's a lot of these similarly powerful big bonuses not to be ignored. So someone's going to automatically be hired here. Yeah, someone named Sep. And Sep is going to come and start foresting for us. We've already planted the broadleaf tree. It's right here. And this is what I mean by the surprising complexity. So this broadleaf tree, for instance, is in sort of lower nutrient soil, but it has good water, good temperature, and it just started planting, so it's in its very early growth phase. In all, everything is like that. Everything is fully simulated. So if we, for instance, look at the sheep here, the sheep has its own needs, its own effects, movement speed, damage, gestation periods, procreative periods. It has its weight and health and everything. Everything is stats. Every flower, every sheep, every tree, everything. It gets to be a lot and like in a good way. So here we go, like this wild wheat, where it's in decent water and decent temperature and growing normally with its yields and everything. So now we need the Gatherer Shack, the garden beds, and the simple stone mason. If you want to prioritize or deprioritize things, so like let's say I want the stone mason first, I can put this as high priority. And as resources are available, the branches and the raw wood, in order to build this, they'll be brought there and built. So each one of these farm fields, garden beds require some sticks and bark and roots and sprouts. And as you can see, some of them have had their barks, roots, and sprouts delivered, some not. And as time goes on, the materials will be delivered and we'll be able to build that. We have some citizens here, like this one, suffering a little bit from hypothermia as it is cold in the early spring. But they're not going to die as a result. They're just going to... what normally happens is they will seek out a heat source, whether it's like a campfire or a torch, and heat themselves up. And this is Sep cutting down trees, delivering them, cutting them to size, and replanting the trees once he's done. And up here in the simple stonemason, as you can see, all of the raw wood has been delivered, and we're only missing a few branches, which will be delivered soon. Yes, they are covering sacks of roots, barks, and sprouts on their shoulders. I know it looked like they were holding pigs or something around, but it wasn't pigs. So we are getting close to the quest of the raw material supply. We're just about done with the simple stone merchant, or mason rather. Just 2 branches left. We only have branches left for the gatherer shack, and what's going to end up here is the forester stump now has fully supplied its own internal storage of raw wood, and will start producing branches instead, because the raw wood storage has hit max. So that's how that works. And here is the garden beds. So garden beds going in. And I'm going to make a few more. Not there, though. There we go. Just a few more garden beds, so we have a nice supply of fruits and veggies. Perfect. So all that's left to be built is the garden shack, and almost all the branches have been delivered. They're in the process of getting delivered now. And then once that's done, we'll have our next quest. So up here at the stonemason, they're automatically turning the raw stones into hewn stones. Nothing that I need to do about that. All right, there we go. The garden shack is done, and in this case, what I'm going to do is hire a third person for it, rather than leave it at 2. And I'm also going to upgrade the processing speed with rough hewn stone to 100%. So the next tutorial, activate the temperature overlay. That would be this button on the minimap here. This shows you what the temperature is all around the map. And because I don't really have anything that produces heat, like a campfire, basically everything is really cold because it's really early spring. The water overlay, where the water tables are. So as you can see around the rivers, it has some water. And then there are drier areas up here with lower water. So if you click around to the plants, you can actually see the where it has water. So like these forests here, low water, but it's a conifer tree, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas like up here, we've got high water, but it's also like a sort of a barren plateau, so it has bad soil. And a whole mix of everything in between. You know, where good water is in the sort of gray, white, blue, so on and so forth. Next, the dirt overlay. Dirt overlay is where there is high quality dirt versus lower quality dirt. So as you can see, where I put my gatherer shack has some decent dirt. And I'll be taking advantage of that. Then the next one is the map symbols overlay. So if I wanted to see where the red deer are, I could click the map symbol, and now if you look at the minimap here, there are red deer icons everywhere. So if I zoom in here, there should be some red deer around here because the minimap says so. And there they are. No, those are sheep. Where are the deer? Oh, there they are. And that allows you to track whatever you want. So if I'm like, hey, where are there gray wolves? There are gray wolves fairly close, but sort of more up the mountain to where the stonemason is. All right. Next up, let's turn off those overlays. It wants me to change the name of our valley. It's now called the Yoda Valley. All right. The next quest, roof over the head. So it wants us to put roofs over our heads. Pretty reasonable request. And that is going to be in the build menu, but not in resource acquisition. It's going to be in community, streets, and services for the straw hut. For now, I am going to endeavor to make just like a singular straw hut, but that will probably change over time. Just the quest calls for one. So rather than have like 10 incomplete huts, I want one hut that is finished. Once the gardens are done, I'm going to start planting the wheat fields next. And I'm looking at the zoning overlay to figure out how large it can be. Also leaving space for like roads in the future. So if I mouse over the gardening shack, oh, I messed it up. We can actually go one farther, but in this case I don't want it to go all the way clear to the road. I'm going to get rid of this site. In fact, I might do the same here and here. And the purpose of this is, early game, you're going to need like a lot of grass for different purposes, and having a massive amount of grass from the wheat fields plus all the cereal grains is going to be a real benefit, I think. There we go. And we have a little bit more space over here for additional gardens or something. But basically, I have like more or less maxed out this garden shack, this gatherer shack. Keeping in mind, of course, that there is a certain maximum of internal storage and how many workers can actually physically work here. So this straw hut requires 50 more straw. All of the delivered branches are done. And straw is one of the things the gatherers collect at the bottom. The gatherer shack has already collected 184 straw, because straw is a consequence of also collecting wild grain. So anytime they harvest wild wheat, they're also collecting grasses in the process, plus all of the land clear that I did was also grabbing a whole bunch of grass. So should only be a matter of time until the straw hut gets done. Now there is a full day-night cycle. You can kind of turn that off up here in the options, but I like to leave it on. I think it's a nice feature. Plus, all of your citizens like actually go to sleep at night. So generally, I will fast forward time in the night because not much happens in the middle of the night. So let's go to 10 speed until it's morning. And I'm getting a little bit of warnings up here that like they're getting hypothermic, and of course shelters will help to remedy that. So we are working on a fix already. So you have 3 people that have bottomed out their like temperature tolerance, if you will. All right, it is asking me to get protection from the cold and weather now as a part of the tutorial. So it wants me to get firewood and rough rags. Firewood is a production of a sawing place. A sawing place will make firewood and planks. And for now, I'm just going to place it right here, right next to our forester stump. And then for rags, we're going to get a rudimentary tailoring table. And the rudimentary tailoring table essentially mostly takes grass and turns it into like flax. And I'll put that right here as well. So we'll get those built now that we have the straw hut. Just because we have a straw hut doesn't mean like I want to leave it at that, because straw huts only house 2. So let's go ahead and expand these straw huts so that everyone has shelter, as that seems more kind. And another part of the tutorial is to build some additional roads. So now that we're on that part of the tutorial, I'm going to lay out some basic roads here that we will endeavor to construct. And the basic dirt mud roads are free. They become more expensive when they become stone roads later on at later texts. So that will be not enough houses for everybody, so I still need to add like 1 more. There we go. The most important ones here is probably the rudimentary tailoring table and the sawing place to prioritize over everything else. So I'm going to raise that priority so that they do it before the other projects. The straw huts are 50 straw apiece. We do have a lot of straw already, so that's pretty good. And here is the sawing place. And the sawing place has automatically hired someone. So the sawing place's activities is to take raw wood, turn it into planks, or to make firewood from raw wood. Or firewood from branches. I'm going to remove, well, no, I'll leave the firewood for branches for now. And here is the rudimentary tailoring table. So the rudimentary tailoring table takes grasses and turns them into rags. Wool, which we don't have any animals yet, into rags. Rags and leather into basic clothes. Rough rags and wool into basic clothes. And the tutorial on the right here wants me to make at least 1 firewood and 1 rough rag. So we're going to leave them running for now. I'm going to start using the rough-hewn stone to upgrade the sawing place and the forester stump, because wood and planks are like 2 of the most important resources that we need going forward, so it'd be good if they got a production boost. Much the same way we did the gatherer shack. There's a lot of animals around. Alright, we got another straw hut, so that's our second. We're gonna get everyone houses, because you're not gonna have, like, immigration or birth rates without that, obviously. I'm going to raise the volume up a little. So, we produced our first firewood. If I click on the sawing place, as you can see, we have like 1 bundle of firewood. It's not much, but it's a start, and it satisfies that quest. So the next one is the rags, and the rags is waiting on grass to be processed by Erica, the tailor. And we have all but 2 people in a bed now. So it's getting pretty close. While I'm here, I am going to install a heat source, I think. So I'm going to do a fin torch right here. A fin torch is like a very crude way to heat yourself up. It's like a brazier of sorts. And I want to install it there just because I have a lot of hypothermia warnings, and it would remedy that for a very low cost of just some basic raw wood, which we do have a decent amount of. We have a decent amount of the wheat getting sown, and it is growing fast because it has good soil, good water. It's relatively decent conditions, and should be productive soon. All right, we're going to do another night, so I'm going to fast forward it a bit. We still haven't made our first raw rag. I'm not really sure what Erica's doing. We can see, if I click on Erica, we can see what she has been doing. And she has been moving to and from the gatherer shack in order to, I'm assuming, collect the grass. So she just hasn't processed it into a rag yet. But that, I'm sure, will be done today. So there's the fin torch, and if we open up the heat overlay, as you can see, it's a little bit warmer around the fin torch than it is elsewhere. So it's, I am gonna fire the worker that was working at the fin torch, because as we head towards the summer, we're really not going to need a heating source. So that was just a stopgap measure to provide some heat before the summer really sets in. All right, she is crafting rags, and that will satisfy that requirement. And there's the final hut. So everyone has a place to sleep. All right, next. Jobs and priorities. Hire or dismiss a worker. So that would, of course, be... firing would be here. And then when they're fired, you hire them in the same button when the slot is vacant. And then the other part of the tutorial is setting priorities. So if I wanted to prioritize collecting leaves over mushrooms, I could raise that from 4 to 3 and unpause it so that we start collecting leaves for the forester stump once they're done with branches and trees, which they are currently finished. And that would be the priorities. And priorities are pretty important. So if all of a sudden I find myself with a huge deficit of grass and I need the grass to make the rags, I can change the gatherer shack for grass from like 5 to 1 to, you know, increase the priority of harvesting grass over everything else so that we can actually get grass for progress. So the next quest, build a hand mill, which mills cereal grains down to flour. Build a simple Baker Simple oven to turn the flour into bread. And a campfire, which is sort of like where people go to eat. So I'm going to put the campfire here. I'm going to put the hand mill here. And the simple baker oven there. And then run a simple dirt road here. And that's all 3 projects. So this needs raw wood, that's pretty cheap. This needs sticks, raw wood, and hewn stone. And this needs sticks, raw wood, and hewn stone as well. So it shouldn't be very long until we have what is necessary in order to build those 3 things. With that in mind, that's 3 more workplaces, and I have 3 unemployed people. So that's going to employ everyone, essentially. And this is where the game obviously prioritizes the whole, like, you need immigrants, because I now have more workplaces, or I'm about to have more workplaces than I have even people to work them. We could pull back from the Gatherer Shack, fire one, furlough one, and put them to work elsewhere. That would be reasonable, perhaps. And up here, as you can see, yes, it is saying that I only have like a 1/5 of a day's worth of food. But what I was saying before is like, that's really not a good indicator of how well we can feed ourselves, because it's like springtime and there's fruit and veggies everywhere growing wild. So it's really not much of an issue. Plus we have all the cereal grain that's about to get milled and then baked into bread. I am going to upgrade the collection speed of the Gather Shack, so we gather faster. And then I'm going to do storage space for the Forester Stump, so we have more storage for the basic materials. And the sawing place... I'm not going to do anything with that just yet. So here's our... I'm going to fire one of the campfire workers. So here's our campfire. And the campfire, of course, is another warming area, right? So we have a blob of warm here as a consequence of that. But it doesn't really require 2 people to work there. So what this is it's a place for... If we had raw meat and wood, we could have the person working in the campfire make cooked meat. They get bread, they don't bake bread. They're collecting it. They're collecting fruits, bread, veggies, mushrooms, dairy products, exotic fruit, and eggs to supply the sort of the neighborhood. And then they're also grilling meat. So they don't do a lot of labor. They do a lot of, like, hauling. Which is just an important difference. So they're sort of like market workers. Although the game has markets, so don't get too confused with that designation. Alright, it's another nighttime, so I'm going to whiz through the nighttime. And I feel like as I play, the game's getting quieter. There we go. So we need the hand mill and the simple baking oven, and I would say the hand mill is more important because you can't really bake stuff if you don't have milled stuff, so the mill's got to come first. And it's essentially just a Quarn worker. I feel bad for them because all they do is grind all day long. The daily grind. And as we wait for the raw resources of like sticks and raw wood in order to actually build that stuff, we're taking advantage of the time by putting down some mud roads, which increases moving speed. Alright, only 4 more branches and we'll be all set. If I want to prioritize that, we can raise branches over logs. And, done. We now have a miller. That didn't take very long. So, the miller is taking the cereal grains and milling it into flour. And then once we have the simple baking oven, they'll take the flour and bake it into bread. And we'll have that supply chain quest finished. The wheat fields are starting to be productive. So they're doing like the first harvest and grabbing a whole bunch of cereal grain, which you'll see reflected here. So in the fodder tab, we are getting cereal grains going up and grass subsequently because it grows with the cereal grains going up. And then once we have 2 more branches, we'll have that done. So I'm going to switch priorities again for the forester stump. So that we do branches over raw wood. And get that done. But they're kind of done for the day, so I'm going to fast forward time. Okay, there's the branches. And now we have the simple oven, which takes the flour and firewood to make bread. Thank you for tuning in to Of Life and Land, which originally streamed live on Twitch. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhodamont.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you'd like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhodamont.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. Special thank you to my Twitch subscribers, Patreon patrons, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, fellow settlers.